everyone see the countdown clock on your screen? Yes? Okay, no problem. We actually on the screen now, but they will see the countdown clock just like we are. And then when it counts to 0, then the moderator will be on the YouTube screen, just like we have in last September. So we are counting on you, Denise. You are the first one. Yes, no problem. Okay, 2 minutes to go. I believe all of you have a lot of webinar experience, but actually this is a little bit different because we have a technical team to help us to rearrange the screen, and it looks more, for me it looks more professional and more organized. So maybe later after the event you can see the YouTube, you can see the video, see the webinar on the YouTube screen. That will be very interesting. Okay, we have 1 minute. Denise, it's your turn. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. We are here together today during Taiwan Gender Equality Week and the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women 65th session, which is a virtual session in 2021 in this month of March, which many of us celebrate as Women's History Month. Our program today explores how to accelerate women's economic justice and women's economic empowerment. My name is Denise Scotto, and I'm your moderator, facilitator of this high-level special event. This event is being sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the Foundation for Women's Rights Promotion and Development. At the same time, special thanks are given to the Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office in New York, who has been such a stable and longstanding support of the Commission on the Status of Women and its Taiwanese delegates who have come here for many years to attend these special and important events. We'll be hearing from a variety of speakers today from different viewpoints to learn from their perspective as to how to mainstream gender equality and how to deliver women's economic empowerment. By gathering different practices from the public sector to the private sector to civil society organizations, we seek to inspire people to take action for women's economic rights, to build a better and resilient future for all. We agree, as we heard the UN Secretary General say just a couple of days ago during the opening of the Commission on the Status of Women, that we have to move beyond fixing women to fixing systems. Investing in women and girls brings the double dividend of elevating not only the individual women and the individual girls, but the entire families. And that goes into creating more economic and more stable and prosperous communities and better societies, which are prosperous and peaceful for everyone. Most of us know too well that progress for our world's women and girls has been much slower than all of us want. We need to be vigilant each and every day, particularly at this moment in time where it feels like there are so many rollbacks or a backlash against women's rights. We're still struggling to bridge the gap and overcome many obstacles that keep women from fulfilling their complete potential. Equal pay, lack of leadership positions, sexual harassment and gender-based violence, as well as reproductive justice, and issues of these all are issues that women continue to face today. Women bear the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic in a variety of ways, including in the social and economic impacts that have caused this economic crisis. Meanwhile, on average, women still earn less than their male counterparts. So we look to legal obligations of governments when we speak about equal pay for work of equal value, which is clearly spelled out in the CEDAW Treaty in Article 11 dealing with employment. I also want to call attention to the CEDAW Article 13, which deals with economic and social benefits. And that means we talk about bank loans and other forms of credit. And then finally, CEDAW Article 15, equality before the law. And when we talk about women's economic empowerment, we can focus on the ability of women to enter into contracts, business contracts, contracts of all kinds. We need to implement and to design policies and programs now more than ever before, which lift women and girls through economic mechanisms. At the end of the day, it's fair to say that women are resilient and are rallying through collective action, using and harnessing social media and other information communication technology, fostering solidarity with one another across the globe, the way we're here today from so many different countries, and spreading awareness of the evidence that demonstrates the benefits of gender equality for all of society. So let us begin with our special distinguished group of experts that we have for you today. I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker, the Honorable Karen Stratis. Ms. Stratis is the State Secretary to the Swedish Minister for Gender Equality, and her responsibility deals with anti-discrimination, anti-segregation. I want to let you know that state secretaries are politically appointed senior officials at government offices who lead the work of a ministry directly under the head of the minister or another minister. And in this case, Honorable Karen Stratis specializes in gender equality, discrimination, human rights, children's rights. Her background includes working in the Office of the Prime Minister since 2014, in the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Employment. Without further ado, I turn over now and welcome the Honorable Karen Stratis.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to open this webinar on a current and challenging topic: advancing women's economic rights and independence for inclusive futures. As State Secretary for the Minister of Gender Equality in Sweden, I am very happy to contribute to the work of the world's first feminist government. A feminist government ensures that a gender equality perspective is brought into policymaking on a broad front, both nationally and internationally. This means that gender equality is central to the government's priorities in decision-making and in resource allocation. Women and men, in all their diversity, must have the same power to shape society and their own lives. This is a human right, and it's a matter of democracy and justice. Economic equality between women and men is a crucial aspect of gender equality. Economic gender equality means that women and men have the same opportunities to reach their full potential throughout their life cycle. Women and men must have the same opportunities and conditions to support themselves and any children they might have. We must break deep-rooted, unequal gender power relations. We must enhance women's economic participation and empowerment. This is key to strengthening women's fundamental rights, including sexual and reproductive health and rights. Women's obvious right to decide over their own bodies is not only crucial to the individual, but also fundamental to democratic and economic development. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has bluntly put the apparent gaps in women's economic independence in focus. And SRHR services have been pushed aside. Importantly, the COVID-19 has shown to affect everyone, everywhere. But it also has shown to affect different groups of people differently, deepening and exacerbating pre-existing inequalities. Those with the least resources and in the most disadvantaged circumstances are generally those who suffer the greatest strain under the pandemic. Often women and girls are part of those groups. It has also put in focus what we already know, that many women have a weaker position on the labor market. Many women work part-time in low-paid jobs and in sectors with less secure conditions. Many women bear most of the responsibility of the unpaid work at home and care of dependents. And as we all know, part-time jobs with low wages also result in low pensions. Taken together, these conditions contribute to making women more dependent on their partner and also making it harder to leave a violent relationship. At the same time, women have, to a large extent, worked at the front line of the pandemic, working around the clock in healthcare and elderly care, bearing a heavy burden and standing a great risk of being exposed to the virus themselves. The COVID-19 pandemic is a profound shock to our societies and economies. It affects the lives and livelihoods of women and men around the world. But we now have the chance to build back better. It is important that we apply a gender equality perspective in all our work. As governments, we must ensure that budgetary allocations do not leave women behind. Women and girls must be at the heart of response and resilience plans and at the core of long-term strategies for sustainable recovery. This is gender budgeting put into practice. COVID-19 highlights the important work that is being conducted by women across the world. In fact, it shows that society is dependent on women, particularly as frontline workers, but also as care workers. In responding to the pandemic, work conditions in female-dominated sectors, such as the health and care sectors, must be addressed. Long-standing structural inequalities in society in general must be rectified. But we must also address the role of men and boys as drivers for change. Men and boys in all their diversity must be part of transforming gender norms and inequality. Sweden will continue pushing for women's and girls' economic empowerment. As a concrete example, Sweden is one of the co-leaders in the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights within the framework of the UN initiative Generation Equality. The Action Coalition will contribute to strengthening economic and social reforms for gender equality and work against discriminatory laws. It will also focus on women's and girls' access to financial resources, work, education, and social protection systems. It will also bring the topic of trade and gender equality to the fore. To conclude, responding to the pandemic is about building a more equal. It's about building a better world and a better future for everyone. Thank you for your attention, and I am excited about taking part of this dialogue here today.
Thank you so much, Honorable Karen Strandis, for that comprehensive and very detailed way of making us understand how important it is for a government to really take a look at its gender budgeting and the effects, the social and economic effects on women and girls of this whole COVID-19 pandemic. It's going to be a very rich talk, because you've laid out so beautifully so many of the issues that we're dealing with and we'd like to address today. So I'm going to now turn to our next speaker, the Honorable Audrey Tang. Honorable Audrey Tang is the Digital Minister for the Republic of China, Taiwan. Audrey Tang has been described as one of the 10 greatest Taiwanese computing personalities. Minister Tang was a child prodigy, reading the works of classical literature before the age of 5, advanced mathematics before the age of 6, and programming before the age of 8. By 2000, at the age of 19, Minister Tang had already held positions in software companies and worked in California's Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur. In August 2016, Minister Tang was invited to join the Executive Yuan as a minister without portfolio, making her the first transgender and the first non-binary official and the top executive cabinet. Welcome, a very warm welcome to you, Minister. The floor is yours.
Hello, good local time, everyone. Really happy to be here virtually to share some thoughts around how to make SDG 5 work in Taiwan. Here is this iconic picture as Taiwan is the first in Asia to legalize marriage equality for gays, lesbians, non-binaries alike. And to get to this moment, the government and citizens have striven to advocate for the rights and the interest from the feminist movement, from the LGBTQ+ movement, and have actively promoted social dialogue for the past 30 years. Now you see the tweet from our president, Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. The first Taiwan Pride Parade was held in 2003, with the number of participants increasing every year. Last year, we're probably one of the only, if not the only jurisdiction to have physical Pride Parade and also transgender Pride Parades. From May 2019, the legislation of same-sex marriage to May 2020, in the first year, more than 3,700 same-sex couples across Taiwan successfully registered their marriages. But this system change legislations includes such assessments. And this enabled, for example, the state legislator, and of course, Sweden still leads us at 47% women, but we are 42% women, which is not that bad in this corner of the world. And when the UNDP, the UN Development Program, started compiling the Gender Inequality Index, using the UNDP methodologies for 2019, our Gender Inequality Index was 0.045, ranking the 6th place in the world and the first in Asia. Again, Sweden was the 3rd in the world. So, of course, we still have rooms for improvement, for example, in the gender ratio in cabinet ministers and ambassadorship, but our president is 100% women. So now turning to the greater economic empowerment. In 2002, through this cross-sectoral collaboration, we enacted the Act of Gender Equality in Employment to protect gender equality in the right to work. And according to the Act, several family-friendly measures were promptly taken. For example, establishment of breastfeeding rooms was at 80% now, more than 80%, I believe, this year, and more than 94% of employees reported that they did not experience employment discrimination based on gender or gender orientation. I can attest to that. I never faced any discrimination in working in the cabinet. And the average hourly wage gap between the sexes in Taiwan Taiwan has been lower than the US, Japan, as you can see here, South Korea, and other countries in the previous years. And this year, we're happy to report that we've also moved our equal pay day, symbolizing that previously women had to work 53 or 54 more days to get the same pay as men. And now we've cut it to February 20. Of course, still rooms for improvement. Now, with the progresses, still there are some shortcomings. For example, in science, tech, engineering, and mathematics, in this graph, you can see in 2018, still less than around a quarter of STEM students in tertiary education in Taiwan are women. And the ratio is gradually, but very gradually improving. And therefore, there are still more men in occupations such as skills-based work and machinery, while women focus on, for example, office support personnel. And of course, that needs to change. Even though the proportions of women specialists in Taiwan is already higher than of our neighbors like Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, but compared with Nordic countries, we still have many things to do. So we turned, for example, to the Ministry of Education. They plan education courses to encourage the enrollment to STEM fields, like role models, like the Taiwan Outstanding Women in Science Award to give speeches and showing the senior high school students the possible career path. And the Ministry of Science and Technology have been rolling out very interesting, like this short clip, to encourage women to engage in science and technical research projects. This particular one, new as of this year, is the GICS, the TW focusing on cybersecurity, and it features this quite viral video, a short clip of a young lady asking, isn't cybersecurity mostly for boys? And yours truly saying, well, computers never ask about my gender. So, of course, we will strive to build a friendlier workplace, promote retention of women, and reduce gender segregation. And we will also continue to encourage public and private sector committees to follow the now golden 1/3 gender ratio. Nowadays, many institutions are pushing for a 40% gender ratio to further strengthen women's role in decision-making. And now one more thing. During the pandemic, which we countered with no lockdown, and the infodemic, which we countered with no takedown, one of the most useful social innovation is this hotline, or 1922, where anyone can call and get their questions about the pandemic answered in real time. More than 2 million calls were placed last year. But last April, there was a very surprising call from a young boy who called saying, hey, you're rationing out medical grade mask, but all my family get from our local pharmacy is pink ones, while all the boys in my class have navy blue medical grade mask. And this boy doesn't want to go to school, for he said only girls wear pink. Well, the next thing we know, the next day at 2 p.m., the daily press conference, all the medical officers, including Minister Chen Shizhong of Health and Welfare, wore pink medical mask. And so I think Minister even said that Minister Chen's childhood idol was the Pink Panther. So that's some gender mainstreaming right there, for the boy immediately became the most hip boy in his class, for only he has the color that the heroes wear, and the hero's hero, well, I guess, wear. And for quite a few weeks, all the leading brands on social media turned pink. And I think this is a great anecdote to show that biology should not determine one's destiny. And I look forward for the dialogue after this talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Minister Tang, for really giving us an example of what Taiwan is doing on the ground from the informational standpoint of how progress has been made, but also because I've been to Taiwan several times, including being one of the experts for the CEDAW National Review. I actually want to affirm the way you've really been able to illustrate through the information that there is this incredible collaboration within the NGO community, but also with the government sector. And that is something that we can see has been very successful to make positive change happen that affects women and girls on the ground, and that affects your society as a whole. So I so appreciate you bringing that out to the fore. I'd like to now get into our section where you and the Honorable Karen Strathis can really speak a little bit to some question that we have posed for you. So why don't I bring out the question now? We know that this global gender gap exists, but some of us feel like it's going to take another 100 years before we even close the gap, or before there really is meaningful gender equality in societies around the world, not just in one country, but for women around the world. So what is, in your opinion, would be the most emergent policy that would speed up or accelerate women's equality and leave no one behind, leave no women anywhere in the world behind? Shall we pose the question first to you, Honorable Karen Strathis?
Well, thank you. I agree. It feels like it is taking too long to make progress on the arena when it comes to gender equality. But we also know that progress is possible. So we have to focus on that. And I think looking back at history, the women's rights movement and the mobilization for women's rights have been crucial to take these steps forward, because we know that progress doesn't come by itself. It's been hard work behind every reform that has taken us along the way. And we have still a lot to do in Sweden, but we've come some way, and that's the result of hard work. No free lunches here. But I would like to point out, I mean, reforms, pressure from the civil society and in society in general leads to reforms, and that's really key. And reforms that are important to make sure that women also enter the labor market, such as affordable, high-quality childcare and individual taxation. And in Sweden, we're still working on a more equal balance on when it comes to parental leave. It's possible for men to take as much parental leave as women, but we still haven't reached anywhere near 50-50. But those kinds of reforms that also that enables women to join the workforce and have an economy of their own, so that they can make their own choices about life more. And we also see the link, of course, to violence here, because it's harder to leave a violent relationship if you cannot, if you're dependent on your partner for your survival. So that's just a few points.
Thank you so much. Minister Tang?
Well, as the digital minister, I have to say that during COVID, we have discovered that a combination of universal healthcare, a thoroughly digitized app, and IC card-based universal healthcare, plus broadband, universal broadband as a human right, has been really an enabler for women to basically enter not only the first line response to COVID, but also building through entrepreneurship, best practice sharing, telework and telecare also, and have the access to the, if not the best practice, certainly the better practices. Because anywhere in Taiwan, you're guaranteed to have 10 megabits per second broadband for just 16 euros per month. Even on the top of Taiwan, almost 4,000 meters. If you don't, it's my fault, like personally. And so because of that, we do get a lot of best practice sharing from the entrepreneurs, from the role models that I referred to, and even from very young people. One of the more impactful citizens initiative from the civil society organizations in the past couple of years has been this idea of upcycling and turning, for example, our manufacturing of straws, plastic straw for our national identity drink, the bubble tea, into something that's carbon neutral and also thoroughly upcycling. And the initiative was started by a very young lady when she was still 16 years old. It was her civics class assignment to start a petition online. And this e-participation really leveled the playing field, for she didn't have to wait until she's 18 or join a political party or go to the strike on Fridays, with all due respect, but actually link through the civil society organizational leaders to propose meaningful environmental impact and changes, and therefore changing people's ideas about how to work in a specifically like zero carbon way of life. So with these examples, I think more and more young women and also men are looking into this e-participation and co-creation across sectors to build their own data coalitions, data initiative, even before they turn 19. So I think the gender equality and gender mainstreaming almost goes without saying for these very young people, and it's time for us to co-create a future with them, not just for them.
Thank you so much, Minister Tang. I think that it's so important to hear your contribution and perspective, because a lot of times, we know how important the internet is and access to that, and we hear about the digital divide and how people are left behind. But I think that you've really clearly shown how it, in concrete examples, how it really does make a difference in many ways. And one of the other things that I'd like to focus on, since we do have medical doctors on our program today, is we hear so much about telehealth, but you brought up telework and telecare, and these are other important things for us to also put in the mix when we think about the health response, because a society that can function using all of its resources is one that really needs, I think, to really use the totality of what it has. And I think that you've done an excellent job of trying to do that, given your portfolio and your background in Taiwan. So it's an incredible example for everyone. And again, the emphasis on telehealth that we have globally is key, but, perhaps there is greater collaboration for you in your position with other countries in focusing on telework, with other projects. So that's just a little something that I'm planting a seed in your mind about. And, I'm sure other things will grow from that. But at this point, I want to thank both you, Minister Tang, and the Honorable Karen Strandis, because we appreciate your expertise. We appreciate your perspective from the government, from the broad strokes, from your comprehensive statements that you've provided, but yet also the details and the way to show specific policies that can help accelerate women's economic empowerment and women's economic justice. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to continue to lend our support to you. Know that we here working as advocates to advance the status of women and girls are behind you, and we're rooting and cheering you on as you continue in your work. And we look forward to hearing again next year or in the next months that go by, any new innovations that come up or any new strategies that you've put into place. So without further ado, I'm going to conclude this session and thank you again. Now we're going to be turning to a very special speech that we have. As many of you know, we have with us today the Ambassador at Large from the Republic of China, Taiwan, who is doing incredible work in many ways. For many years, she's been doing such incredible work in different capacities. Like so many of us, she's worn different hats, but it's for me to introduce the Honorable Ching-Yi Lin. Ambassador Lin is a medical doctor. She's been a lecturer. She served as director of the Taiwan Health Corps, which is an NGO, as well as the director of the Taiwan's Women's Link. Ambassador Lin earned a master's in genetic counseling at the National Taiwan University, NTU, as well as a doctor of medicine and another master's at Chongshan Medical University. She served as a legislator in the Legislative Yuan, and in that capacity, she participated in a special event for UNCSW a couple of years ago that I had the privilege and the honor of moderating in New York at the Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office here. It's my very great pleasure and honor, to extend a very warm welcome to the ambassador. Welcome, Ambassador. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all our members, and it's so happy. It's time to. It's a CEDAW season. But it's a CSW season. But it's so sad that we could miss face to face by webinar. But it's still very happy to share some experience and some viewpoints. Here's that. I want to share some viewpoints about oops. Nope. Okay. Yes.
I think we're just a little. Are you there, Ambassador?
Okay? Yeah. Yes,
Okay,
I'm here.
great.
It's okay. Okay.
Great. Yes.
I want to share about gender perspective in public policy making to acceleration gender equality. I think the most thank you. I think the most important in Taiwan we are facing are the how to changing the culture, how to make the culture become more domestic and more gender equality. So usually I will show that this is pictures that how we could to improve the gender segregations. The pictures actually are our president Tsai Ing-wen, and in Taiwan she is a president, but she also we called a commander of the army forces. If you know, in 2012, still have some voice about why is a how possible a woman could become the commander of the army forces. But until now, I think we could find in many pictures and many these views that she actually be a very good leaders, and it show us the female leaders is really have her capacity and her ability, especially during the pandemic situations. Next, please. And in Taiwan, I think the more female participation, the more gender equality policy making. The pictures show the female journalist and the young female politician. And in Taiwan, I think since 2014, have a more and more female the generation, especially female, they join the political jobs and try to make the policy making to join that. And another picture is the National Doctors' Days in Taiwan. During that days, we have almost 100 female doctors who have a talk with our president and our Minister of Health and Welfare, especially during the National Doctor Days. That is an important things that I want to share to show to our society that female doctors and female any female professors and every females employees, they are so different with they need to be seen, and actually they are active to be the join the policy making. So during that days, this is female doctors. They discuss with our Minister of Health and Welfare and our president to talk about their viewpoint, especially in policy makings in medical environments. Next, please. And in just like Audrey Minister Tong, she said, in Taiwan, the female parliament members increasing. In 2012, we have almost a third, 1/3 of parliament members are female. In 2016, we have a 38% female members in parliament. And in 2020, we have over 41% female members in our parliament. Of course, we still hope one day we could have half and half, just like we said, 2025, to achieve the 50-50s. And another is very special in Taiwan that we have more and more migrant women from another countries, especially Southeast Asia. So in our leading party, we have the conference is a migrant women's conference. Try to encourage and help the migrant women to participate our political party, our policy making, and to join the communication with government. That is will be very important to have more different viewpoints and empowerment. This is we call migrant women in Taiwan. Actually, they are further the very important power in Taiwan. Not only the nation, not only Taiwanese women, but also we welcome and encourage more the women come from another countries, come to Taiwan and join the gender equality policy makings. That I think in further 10 years that will become very important power in Taiwan, especially in gender equality and the policy making. Next. And just like now we are still facing the pandemic, COVID-19, it seems last year. Actually, during the pandemic initially, I really worry about women, especially most of the women, especially the mid-age or old-age women, they are weak position in the society, especially some they in charge the very difficult job. For example, in Taiwan, cleaner in the stations, actually most of them are middle-aged women. So when pandemic situations, if we couldn't provide the personal protection equipment for them and have the very friendly and health working environment, they will be the most dangerous in their daily life. But we are so lucky that because we really all the policy based on gender equality and we have the gender equality society. So until now, we have not anyone cleanser in our public environment be infected by COVID-19. And another picture shows our nurses. In Taiwan, we have over 80% our nurses are women. That's still a gender segregation job. But also in the pandemic situations, all the nurses and all the cleaner in hospital, they get the equipment at the same that another we call medical physicians, and they also be empowered and in charge by very good the right and the health working environment. So until now, we have only less than 10 nurses be infected during the pandemic. So I think that a very important viewpoint I want to point out that based on gender equality society, we could to less gender-based damage in pandemic. Next. In Taiwan, until now, we have almost 1,000 cases of the COVID-19, and over 900 patients actually they are acquired it outside of Taiwan, and only 77 infected cases local, and only we have two health workers closer infections, and only this is two the healthcare closer infection conditions. Actually, we have 3 nurses and 1 cleaner in hospital during first the closer, and 3 nurses and 1 migrant health workers in second closer of healthcare's closer infection conditions. So I want to say that is a I in many the situations in pandemic conditions, women's because they domestically work in the healthcare or the cleaner positions, and they are most weakness during these situations. So more care about this environment and more have good policies to make sure they could be protected. That is important to prevent the weakness women become much more weakness during the pandemic situation. Next. And in the policy and the laws and regulations, I think in Taiwan, we initiated gender mainstream policy since 2006, even we are not a member of UN. And also we check the CEDAW in our local and central government law and regulations in 2013 to make sure the regulations and the law in central and local government are have not any gender discriminations or gender inequalities. And also I think we have two very important acts. One is gender friendly employment act and the gender friendly education act. Especially the gender friendly education act, we have over 10 years. I think that is important to build. We have a gender friendly environment. That is one reason that we could pass the Same Sex Marriage Act last year. And also we have the gender quotas in local and central government, especially the council and our the parliament. Even now, we had at least 1 in 4 quota in local council and half quota in the parliament member at large. It's still not very good enough. We have almost 40% in our parliament, but we still hope we could over 50% in the future. Next. So I think in the future, we still hope we could have more entrepreneur, especially in female, in young girls, and the more political participations and the more leading positions. Our minister Tong, she showed the pictures, the 5 the leaders in our the pandemic control center. They wear the pink mask. It's a very good education for young boys and young girls that about the colors not belonging to any sex. But we still hope if we have a more gender balance in the leading positions, for example, the 5 leadings in our the pandemic control centers are men. If we could have more female in leading positions, more female to participate in our policy makings, I think it will help us to have more gender equality environment and have more gender basis and gender mainstream policy making. It's my experience, and it's very happy to share the thinking with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We appreciate you speaking about all the work that you've been doing and to really, I think, emphasize how in public policy, culture and gender stereotypes are just so important. And the way you've spoken about President Tsai, and contrasting that as being commander in chief of the armed forces, right? And then how we see also, the color pink, of being thought of as, oh, that's a girl's color, boys can't wear those masks, and then we do see leaders who are wearing the color pink to try to change that stereotype. So I do think that, by bringing out these two things about culture and gender stereotypes, you've brought an added important dimension to our talk today, which a lot of times we don't realize, but these stereotypes do inform us, and hold us back in many ways. So I'm sure that we will be speaking in our next session about some of the ideas that you brought up and some of the concrete examples that you talked about specifically around COVID-19, and how that's affecting women and how Taiwan is really trying to be such a leader in this area of protection, which it is. I mean, we all look to you and your country and your leaders because of the incredible example that you are. So I want to thank you for being with us today, for taking time out to join us for this special speech that does, help so many of us. So wishing you all the best in your continued efforts. I know that you are doing incredible work and will continue to do so. And it's my hope that we can hear from you again in the future. So I'd like to now turn us to our next session. We have another very interesting session, one that I think many of you will find to be of interest, but also valuable. For those of you joining us late, my name is Denise Scotto, and I am facilitating today's program that deals with Accelerating Women's Economic Empowerment and Women's Economic Justice. This is being sponsored and presented by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of China, Taiwan, and the Women's Rights Promotion and Development Organization. So we are here now at our final period. We're having an interactive dialogue with two important experts just for you so that we can learn some more. And what I'd like to now do is to introduce our next speakers. We have with us today Ms. Aljean Sajeri. She is a seasoned foreign policy and international security expert with over 20 years of legislative and political affairs experience in the United States, in Congress, in political campaigns, in the corporate and the not-for-profit sectors. Previously, she owned a small business specializing in strategic services. She is a native of Liberia, West Africa, and she came to the US at a very young age, at the age of 3, as a political asylee. She's dedicated her career to advancing human rights, the rule of law, global health, food security, and economic development in the developing world. Without further ado, I am going to turn the floor over now to Ms. Sajeri. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today and discuss the partnership that the United States has and the work that we are doing with Taiwan on gender equity. As it was stated, I am the head of external affairs for the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, as well as the head of global gender equity initiatives for DFC. And I want to just say that on March 8th, International Women's Day, the Biden-Harris administration launched an important initiative. It issued an executive order creating this establishment of the White House Gender Policy Council. The executive order stated that advancing gender equity and equality is a matter of human rights, justice, and fairness. It is also a strategic imperative that reduces poverty and promotes economic growth, increases access to education, improves health outcomes, advances political stability, and fosters democracy. The full participation of all people, including women and girls, across all aspects of our society is essential to the economic well-being, health, and security of the United States, and indeed, of course, the entire globe. The DSC is now on the White House's Gender Policy Council, and I am the official representative of the DFC on this council. Women's economic policy empowerment has always been a major priority for the DFC, and the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation has stood up several programs and initiatives to address this. As a development finance institution that invests in emerging markets around the world, DFC recognizes that there is a great need to support women entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses, and to expand access to services such as clean water that are vital to their well-being. We also recognize that investing in women benefits everyone. So often women are the cornerstone of their communities. In the developing world, they run many of the small businesses and the smallholder farms. And if we can empower women to earn more income, we can help them become more productive. This yields tangible results. We know that women who earn more invest more in their homes and their families, putting food on the table and providing healthcare and education for their children. I've seen this throughout my career. I joined the DFC just about a month ago, but I have spent the past 2 decades working on these issues. And empowering women is essential to advancing all of these objectives. And like many of you, I have seen this play out in my own life. This month, I've been reflecting a lot about my own grandmother, who was born in Grand Bassa County, Liberia. and raised in an environment where opportunities for women in the formal economy were very limited. My grandmother, Laura Roberts, grew up surrounded by women who were entrepreneurs out of necessity. They operated small shops and provided an important service to the community and essential income for their families. She earned an income that was modest, also with her own small shop in Crown Hill, Liberia, in Monrovia. And she was able to use that income to pay for her private school fees for her 5 children. And it made all the difference in the world for them, including my mother. So how do we empower women economically? The DFC's approach is pretty simple. We invest in women. DFC's 2X initiative has to date mobilized more than $7 billion around the world, $7 billion to women's economic empowerment. And through the 2X challenge, we've joined forces with others in the G7 community, other G7 countries, to drive additional investment. That includes supporting women-owned and women-led businesses, from a cashmere business in Mongolia to a pharmaceutical company in India. It also means supporting projects that provide women critical services. These include financial services that will help to close the large gender credit gap that women face. It also includes services such as expanding access to clean water and healthcare. Women typically bear the responsibility for gathering the family's water. And when clean water is not easily available, the task of gathering it can take the better part of a day and prevent women from working outside the home and earning income. You might not consider this investment in water infrastructure to be an investment in women, but if you can help save women time in their day, it is providing a valuable service to everyday women across the globe. This is why applying a gender lens to all our investments is so important. In order to support women, we need to understand the specific challenges that they face. That's why we are standing up a program at DFC to train all our investment officers on gender lens investing. DFC invests in women all around the world. It is wonderful to be here today with all of you to exchange ideas on the ways that we can continue to empower women. There is so much more work to be done. And I just thank you for working with us on this important global priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sagery. We so appreciate you bringing in your own personal perspective too, because we can hear so much about many different things and statistics, but when we hear from someone's own personal story, it really makes it more alive and brings it home to us. So thank you for sharing that in addition to what's happening with DFC. It's very important to understand $7 billion is something that the U.S. has already contributed to women around the world just from DFC alone. So that is pretty significant. So we're going to turn the table a little bit with our next speaker. And I'm going to introduce her right now. She's the director of the Kosovo Women for Women. So we have Dr. Ilariana Gashi. She's a medical doctor with a master's degree in management of healthcare administration from the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. In 2017, she led the transition of Women for Women International's Kosovo program to become an independent NGO on its own. So it's the Kosovo Women for Women. Her position also changed from being country director to the executive director, a natural change and a logical conclusion, right? Where she leads and manages the operations and strategy of the organization. Before joining Women for Women International, Dr. Gashi worked for the Canadian International Development Agency, World Vision, the French Embassy in Kosovo, the World Bank, the American International Health Alliance, many groups that those of us who are here and involved in women's human rights work know very well. She was also a member of the Policy and Planning Committee in Kosovo's Ministry of Health. Without further ado, Dr. Gashi, the floor is yours. A very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. I feel so honored to be part of such a distinguished panel and I'm very happy to represent my country, my small country. If yes, you can see my presentation after I have visited Taiwan. This is such a great opportunity to continue the cooperation. So I wanted to present the map of my country. Maybe most of panelists knows us, but still it is not. It is almost the youngest country in the world. So I wanted everybody to see where it is. So it's part of Europe. It's small, but with 10,000 square kilometers, with 1.8 million inhabitants. So when you were talking about the previous speaker speaking about $7 billion of help, in fact, that is what our GDP is. So we are still small and still poor, but we are making progress. So I wanted to first say that, although I didn't put on my presentation, next please. Next slide. CEDAW, I'm very happy to say that when Kosovo became independent, CEDAW was included in our constitution. And our laws are quite good on gender equality. What we need is to put into practice the good laws that we have. So, because we are far. You can see the statistics. You can see that almost 80% of women are not participating in the market. They are not even looking for jobs. They are not active in economic field. And only 13% of working age women are employed. So we are not really using the power that women have on economic side, but we are good into having a very strong civil society asking for gender equality. So when the minister was talking about the Proud Parade, it is included in our laws. The marriage of same sex is allowed, and we organize almost every year for 4 years now the Proud Parade. So, but on economic side we are, I think, weaker. So almost double the number of women you can see in the presentation. With the same level of education, it is almost double number of women waiting for jobs than men. On the businesses side, it's only 13% of businesses that are registered on women's names. I have put it registered on women's names because we do not have segregated data, gender data there. It is just that in the agency for registering businesses, you can see businesses on women's names, but sometimes they are just registered, and in fact, it is not women who run them. It is more their husbands, brothers who do run the business, but it is just on their name. So most of these businesses are micro businesses, and it is more on services, cleaning, hairdressers, food processing, etc. Next slide, please. So I wanted to mention today that in our last elections that have just finished, the affirmative measure that has been included for almost 20 years, that 30% of the members of the parliament have to be women, there has been a huge progress. So for the first time, we have more than 40% of women elected. And most of them have not won the position thanks to the gender quota, but they have won their votes. I would love to emphasize that, in fact, affirmative measures do work. This is how we achieve that in my country. I would love to talk a bit more about the work that we do as an organization. Kosovo Women for Women, we have inherited the experience that we have achieved with Women for Women International. And through that program, since 20 years now, there have been more than 35,000 women who have received skills and tools to become civil, active members of the society. So we do that through a social and economic empowerment program, 1 year long, where we offer trainings for women and we offer them vocational skills development and we offer a small help. Since 2012, we have our job facilitation office, where more than 950 women have found jobs. These are what we call our graduates. These are women that have received the training, received sometimes soft skills training, how to find a job and how to retain a job. And we are very happy that we have increased the number of employed women in the country. Since 2 years now, we have continued to support not only the uneducated, the poorest of the poor women, as we did before. We have continued to work with the women's businesses, and out of those 35,000 women, we have now 50 associations, women's associations established, and they are mainly working into gathering to sell their products. It's kind of an entrepreneurship. So we are very proud to see that they have made progress. And in the next slide, please, you can see some pictures of our work. And the first picture that you see is that the Taiwan ambassador to Hungary, who is the non-resident and covers Kosovo, Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs have supported our associations with laptops and printers so they can prepare their project proposals, they can keep their bookkeepings, and the digitalization of their associations happens. And we have also, with another project, offered those women the training to use how to use the tools, so an IT training. You can also see some pictures of the support that we offer. You can see the incentives that we offer. And in one of the pictures, you can see a group that had unfortunately had to wear masks during the graduation ceremony because of the pandemic. So COVID-19, and they are all blue masks, although we are all women wearing them. As we discussed today, the color of the masks. So next slide, please. So COVID-19 has had, unfortunately, a great impact on our society. The numbers are quite high. So in the beginning of March, we have already 71,344 people diagnosed with COVID and 1,627 people that have lost their lives due to the pandemic. Although we had a lockdown in the beginning, 1 year from now, there was a lockdown for more than 2 months. We had to start opening, and there have been ups and downs in the numbers of infected people. And unfortunately, during the last 2 weeks, the numbers have increased. So the hospitals are getting full, and it is becoming a crisis. So maybe another lockdown will happen, which will be very bad for everyone. But the COVID-19 pandemic has, as in many parts of the world, and especially in less developed countries, affected more women than it did men. Next slide, please. So what we have is that many women had to quit their jobs So they have to take care of the family. Now, the daycare, although it is at a small level, it is not where we would love to see it. Still, they were closed. The schools were closed, so the schooling went on through online. So mothers were the ones that had to help. So although we don't have the data yet, we know that many women have lost jobs, and the number of women that are now looking for jobs, going back to the agency to look for a job again, is really increasing. So homeschooling was mostly on mothers. They became teachers too, so they were overburdened. And unfortunately, the violence against women has increased. So the Ministry of Justice has given the number that the cases of the violence in the family has increased for 17% in the pandemic. So as we work now with businesses too, we have tried to keep a bit the network of businesses, although we are not an economic chamber, to understand what is going on. Some businesses have used the pandemic fortunately. For example, the ones that work in tailoring, they started producing masks. So they had no losses, but most of the businesses had losses. And as most of the businesses that we work with are involved in agriculture, especially last spring when the lockdown happened, they had no place where to sell their products. They could not go out. So the whole crop was lost. We still don't have the numbers of the businesses that were closed. Fortunately, we don't have, the reporting that they were closed, but we still don't know. We yet have to gather the data in the future. And we hope that the impact will not be as big as we are afraid. Next slide, please. So the measures that were taken, the government decided in the spring to help support the businesses. So there was a program for economic recovery, and they helped the businesses paying for most of them the rent, and for the staff they paid the minimal salary for the staff that for the businesses that could not pay their staff, and for the people who lost their jobs. In December, the parliament approved the law on economic recovery. So there are more measures, and the law will be available for 2021, and later we will have to see what will have to be done. But why I mentioned the program is that it was thanks to the members, the women members of the parliament, that the funds, 2 million euros, were earmarked only for women's businesses. So during 2020, our Agency for Gender Equality, that fund was implemented through the Agency of Gender Equality. So the Agency of Gender Equality have implemented and financed the kindergartens that has losses during the pandemic, because not everybody could pay for the kindergarten, so children stayed at home, and it helped the kindergartens that were risking closure not to do it, because it will again affect women, because if they close, even in the future, there will be no place to take children. So again, women will have to quit their jobs. So next slide, please. So what we did as an organization, and I'm happy that we are not the only organization, I'm happy to mention that the women's organizations are numbered, and that their work is having good results. So we are part of a network that is called Women's Economic Forum. It's 7 organizations that we are part. So what we did is that because the support that the government gave, that minimal salary, was given to people who could prove the loss of their jobs in the formal sector. But women are more included in the informal sector too, because they work in the houses, they are nannies, taking care for the elder and doing maintenance. So with the Women's Economic Forum, we financed the same amount. So it was one salary. Unfortunately, we could not do more. So one minimal salary for women who could prove that they lost the informal job. So how we did that is that we checked in the tax administration if they did have an income, if the tax was paid during those months. And if not, we asked for a proof from the family, for example, where they work. So a certificate that they have an informal job. So we paid one minimum salary for them. As an organization, what we did also was organize a call with women's businesses that we work to understand the challenges where they are, the needs are biggest. So based on that, we have given our comments to the Women Economic Forum, because the National Council of Economic Development, which is at the Prime Minister's office, the Women Economic Forum is part of that group. So we gave our recommendations based on the feedback that we received. And my last slide, we have in our building where we work, we are lucky to have a business incubator. Unfortunately, we could not use it last year because of the distance that has to be kept and because of the risk. But this year, we have decided to offer the business incubator to the businesses that are struggling to survive because they cannot pay the rent. So it will be half of what the business incubator has. So we have 10 places. There will be 5 businesses that will be using our premises for free for how long they need. The maximum will be 1 year, but maybe we hope less. We hope that they will be able to recover quicker, thanks to the measures that the government took. And the last thing that maybe as a cooperation with businesses, the Body Shop has opened a shop this year in Kosovo. So as part of their CSR, they have offered to finance one woman that works with us and that is in the most need. So we selected a woman, and Body Shop offered 1,000 euros to that woman. In my previous slide, where you could see pictures, there is that woman. You can tell how happy she is. So we are looking forward to continue to cooperate with the government, with the new parliament, but also with stronger women's businesses who can help the small businesses that are in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gashi, for giving us a snapshot of what's happening in Kosovo. And we can see, even though Kosovo is, as some people consider, a country that's post-conflict reconstruction, there are many of the same issues that are being faced by so many countries around the world, you know, that women are dealing with, that we've spoken about already. So, you know, these are universal issues that women are dealing with in many ways. So we are nearing the end of our time, but I would like to hear a little bit more, and I'm going to take the opportunity to pose a question and ask if both you, Dr. Gashi and Ms. Sajari would be able to give a quick answer to this, because you're such experts that I'm sure you already have ideas in your mind about this, because it's really not, a trick question. It's something that you've been dealing with and working on in your lives, in your career for such a long time. So the question really is about telling those people who really don't know much about gender equality and gender, equity, and why discrimination against women, is so pervasive. What would you say to them about how societies at large can benefit from gender equality? How would you show them or tell them or explain to them why it's important to invest in women? I guess that's it. So would you like to start, Ms. Sajari?
Thank you for the opportunity. I think that it's really important to stress what I said earlier about the fact that when we invest in women, we invest in communities. Women give back to their communities. They spend their money on their households within their communities. They spend their money not on toys and guns, but on educating their children and educating their community, and with it, feeding their families. And so we really see that. I think there's the Women's Economic Forum, others, think tanks throughout the world have said this. Investing in women means investing in communities, investing in stability, investing in sustainable economic development. And so when we not only invest in women, but empower them to make the decisions about their households and their lives and their livelihoods, empower them to be able to earn a respectable wage and support their families, we are investing in entire communities and the generations of their families to come. So
the double dividend. Thank you so
absolutely.
much. Dr. Gashi?
Well, I would be happy to share the stories of women that my organization has supported, and then the work that women did became a family business. So then their husbands and their sons, when they grew up, they joined, and it became a family business. So everybody became wealthy. And I think we should show wealthy countries and see that, in fact, they really benefited from having stronger women. I would love to maybe just mention one anecdote when in a large group, a man said, well, maybe we should take some rights from men and give them to women. And I said, that's the problem. If you think that you should take the right from someone and give it to someone else, that is the problem. Because the right is one of the things that the more people have it, the bigger it becomes for everyone. So if people can understand that giving the right and having more economic power in women's hands is good for men too, it might work better.
I think you're talking about how when we realize that we're one human family, that men and women are part of one human family, and if all of us are empowered, then all of us as a humanity and a consciousness benefits, and that we could really achieve what some only dream and dare to dream of. I'm going to ask our ambassador, if she's still here, if she has any last parting words of wisdom that she'd like to share. Is Ambassador Lynn still here? Would you like to share any final words with us, Ambassador Lynn?
I think in after pandemic, all the global society we are facing a new trade and a new different models. I think in past years for especially for women we have some special economic activities, but now just like today we have the webinar. Maybe we could have a more different participation models, especially in conference, in policy makings, or economic activities. So in my viewpoint, I had some conference with Taiwanese women. I talked maybe in the future we have a more opportunity, especially government could help or NGO could to help our women that to build different economic models, maybe by web, maybe by internet, or some small size companies that is before maybe that is difficult to competition with we said big store or the real store, but I think the pandemic situation will have will affect maybe more than 2 or 3 years. So in these situations, by web or some internet economic models, or some just like the website community models, it's good way to encourage women to participate. Another is, for example, in Taiwan, we have the doctors associations, but all the doctors associations, the all the leaders are men, because they are much more easier to have a meeting after their daily life. It's after 10 p.m. They will go to have some drink and have conference, but that's impossible for female doctors. So because pandemic, many the meetings became just like the webcams, just by internet, and all everyone could stay in their home, balance their job and their family's cares, and we do not worry about how so late we go outside of house. So I think that will become new models and new thinkings policies that how we could encourage women to join all the policy makings, all the economics, all the cultures changing in I said post-pandemic situations. It's our opportunity, is our challenge.
Thank you so much for staying with us, for being with us, Ambassador Lin. And thank you for pointing out that, we are a year into this COVID-19 pandemic, and while we do have hope with vaccines coming out and we have a lot of things changing, 2 to 3 years is a good possibility for the social and economic impacts that we're dealing with to resolve, get better, improve in that situation. So that's important for us to keep in mind when we speak about how that impacts women, how we accelerate women's human rights, but also women's economic justice and empowerment. That's an excellent point. I'd like to thank you again. I want to thank so much Aljean Sajari for being with us today and for sharing again her wisdom, her information, and her personal stories. And also thank Dr. Gashi for being with us and sharing the example of Kosovo and what's happening. At this point, I'd like to start concluding and to just briefly bring out a few points that we can keep in mind. We've spoken a lot about how we can really try to level the playing field. How can we really have more justice for women? How can we really have greater parity? How can we really have women enjoy their fundamental human rights and fundamental freedoms that we know are so dear to men and women? So we've heard already some best practices and examples that are already in place that we know for a long time, and we've seen the example in different countries. We know about women in positions of power and leadership and what that does. And we heard about the Kosovo parliamentarians and how they earmarked specific funds for women in this particular situation. We've heard about gender responsive budgeting and what that means, and taking a long viewpoint in terms of assessing policies and programs within government budget and what that does for women and their policies and programs. We know a little bit about how we have the idea of the constitution of different countries where we have equal rights amendments, or where there is the harmonization of the CEDAW Treaty, or other amendments that give equal rights to men and women, and where there is the idea that there is no discrimination for anyone and no gender-based violence and no gender-based discrimination. So removing discriminatory laws and bringing up laws into place to harmonize with our international obligations is another thing that we've heard today, which is key and important. We've heard again about how culture and negative stereotypes impact society, in particular women and girls. We've heard about executive orders and what that means. We've just heard about the DFC, and we've heard the executive order that the new administration in the US, President Biden and Vice President Harris, has brought to the fore. We've heard about how we close the gender pay gap and what that means and how important that is, and how we have to extend benefits to women, but also to women and men when we speak about parental leave and what that means, and how we have better childcare for women who are working. And to look at the idea of women's work and what that means, because women's work is so valuable, and we do not count that in the GDP yet. We can go on again about extending credit and access to loans to women for their own entrepreneurship and their own small businesses, to create livelihoods for them and for their families. And we've heard how positive this is. And we've heard that from many of our speakers. I want to also speak a little bit about the importance of access to technology and access to the internet. Our digital minister made that very clear. We do not want to leave anyone behind, certainly not our women and girls around the world, because we know what a difference the access to technology is. And again, we do want to talk about some best practices with business, with the business incubator, with better partnership with business. We want to also speak finally about the idea of gender-based violence. And we know how that really is something that impacts women, it impacts girls, it limits their ability to meaningfully live, to meaningfully participate in society, to meaningfully hold jobs, to take care of their families, but then also to be in positions of power and leadership. We've also touched briefly upon affirmative measures. And we know that the CEDAW Treaty does value special measures, affirmative measures, as temporary measures, so that we can boost up quotas or the percentages of women on corporate boards in positions of power and leadership in many different areas. So I hope that these final parting words do impact you and make you realize that, yes, we have this in my country, or we're working on this in my community. We've had a very comprehensive, I think, discussion today with our leaders, with the Honorable Karen Strandis, with the Minister, Honorable Audrey Tang, with, of course, Ambassador Lin, thank you for staying, with Ms. Angeline Sajari, and with Dr. Gashi. So I want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of China, Taiwan, and the Women's Rights Promotion and Development Organization in Taiwan, and the TECO Office, Taiwan Economic Cultural Office in New York, for their steadfast and continued support of women and of promoting gender equality and equity. Thank you all. I hope that you have a good rest of Taiwan's Gender Equality Week and the UN Commission on the Status of Women. All the best to everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.